the largest gaming transaction ever has been approved. It's over. Sort of over. Microsoft has cleared the hurdle of the FTC. That is the major news coming out today, that the judge has ruled that the FTC did not provide sufficient evidence that Microsoft's Activision acquisition would actually harm the industry, and is removing the injunction, which means Microsoft can proceed to pay Activision nearly $70 billion on July 18th to close the transaction. However, there's a lot of details in the judgment that came out, and I think it's worth picking it apart. So let's just dive into the actual details of this ruling, because this is cataclysmic, because at the end of the day, this might be the largest transaction or acquisition, at least that I'm aware of, in recent history, and by far the largest in the gaming industry ever. So let's dive into how the judge got to this position. So from the actual court document, it says 4 weeks ago, the FTC filed this action to preliminary enjoin the merger pending pending the completion of the FTC administrative action. Because the merger has a July 18th termination date, expedited proceedings were commenced. After considering the parties' voluminous pre- and post-hearings, writing submissions, and having held a 5-day evidentiary hearing, these are all court terms, the court denies the motion for the preliminary injunction. That is the key. The court denies the FTC's preliminary injunction. The FTC has not shown it is likely to succeed on its assertion that the combined firm will probably pull Call of Duty from Sony PlayStation, or that its ownership of Activision content will substantially lessen competition in the video game library subscription and cloud gaming markets. That is a bunch of court blah, 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 that basically says the FTC came in, proposed a bunch of different arguments, and those arguments really just didn't pan out. And so there were a couple key arguments in here. First off, exclusive content. The judge went on to write, it says, each of the three major console companies is also vertically integrated first-party game developer and publisher. And while each has a collection of the platform exclusive titles, the Nintendo Switch, the PlayStation, they both have significantly higher number of exclusive games on their platform than Xbox does. In a nutshell, meaning those other platforms actually have more exclusive titles than the Xbox. So by Microsoft getting more exclusive content doesn't necessarily it's not really going to hurt the industry at a high level. The other big piece of information, now this was a really big sticking point that I think, in my 50-cent opinion here, quickly reading through the judgment, really what it came down to is that the judge actually agreed that the Nintendo Switch is a competitor to the Xbox and PlayStation, writing, finally, yes, there are content differences between the Switch and the PlayStation, but many of the most popular games on PlayStation and Xbox consoles are also available on the Switch, including Fortnite, Minecraft, Rocket League, Lego Star Wars, Fall Guys, FIFA, MLB The Show, NBA 2K franchises. And do not forget that Microsoft said, as part of their deal with Nintendo, that they would actually bring Call of Duty to this platform, which currently does not have Call of Duty on it. So this is big, right? The FTC did not propose a good argument that, hey, foreclosure would happen, meaning that PlayStation would go out of business. They did not sufficiently prove that. Also, one of the other big things that came out of this is that the judge actually agreed that, the cloud gaming market isn't really there. There's latency issues. It's still emerging, which goes against the CMA, which we will talk about here in a second, because there's a whole other can of worms that has to go on that side now. But as of right now, Microsoft has cleared the hurdle in the United States. They've cleared the hurdle in the EU. And by all means, it looks like they are just going to go ahead with the closure on July 18th. Microsoft came out and said, this is from Brad Smith. Reminder, Brad Smith, not Brad Sams. I am Brad Sams. We are grateful to the court in San Francisco for the quick and thorough decision, and hope other jurisdictions will continue to working towards a timely resolution. As we've demonstrated consistently throughout this process, we are committed to working collectively and collaboratively to address regulatory concerns. I believe he's fundamentally referring to the CMA at this point, which is the real awkward sticking point, because you have the largest markets on the planet now saying, this is fine. The UK has an issue with the cloud gaming market. The EU does not. The US case, which was really interesting, was so focused around Call of Duty, and that particular title actually, I think, potentially hurt their chances. Although, if you go back and watch all of the testimony from legal experts, many people leading up to this really believe that Microsoft had a pretty sound case. The scary part of it for most economic experts is just how large Microsoft is, and they're spending $70 billion to acquire another company. Of course, that's going to get regulatory scrutiny. But as the judge has shown, there was not sufficient evidence that this is actually going to impact the market. So I can imagine Microsoft's share price has taken off, right? You can imagine that there's probably a lot of celebration down in the world of Activision because Microsoft and Activision have cleared the primary regulatory hurdles. So what happens next? Like, what is the next big thing? Well, July 18th is when the transaction is supposed to close. And by all means, I believe it's probably going to close. The real awkward point now is what is going to happen in the CMA. Are they going to approve this before then? I can't imagine that Microsoft is going to sit back now that they have the EU and the US on board and let this thing pass. Because remember, if it goes past July 18th, then what happens? Then they owe $3 billion. And I don't think that's going to happen. The other awkward thing that we've got to figure out too is what happens with Call of Duty on PlayStation. Now, they don't technically have a deal, although both the CEO and Phil Spencer on stage in court said, look, we're not going to pull this from PlayStation. And I fundamentally believe that is not going to happen. That would be crazy. The question becomes is like, are they going to sign an official deal? Is there going to be an actual agreement that comes out that says, hey, look, Call of Duty on PlayStation is whatever, and it's going to be there for the next 10 years like it is on all the other platforms? At the end of the day, one of the big questions I have is like, how soon will Activision titles start landing in Game Pass? I would suspect that Microsoft is going to have a massive holiday push where they try to get as much of that content into Game Pass because now they're on the clock, right? Phil Spencer just said, hey, look, I'm going to spend $70 billion. They justified it to the board. Now they've got to justify it to their shareholders that they're going to see growth in Game Pass. So when is that going to start to materialize? That is the things to be watching. What is happening with the CMA? We don't quite know how long that process is going to take. And this is where it's going to get fun. Is Microsoft just truly going to just ram this through? Are they just going to say, look, we have gotten the major things out of the way, and the CMA, sorry, like, we'll just pull from your market, or maybe they'll do some weird carve out and not have Call of Duty available in Game Pass in those markets or in cloud streaming, which actually probably hurts the consumer in that demographic. But yeah, this is a very big deal. This will be, I mean, can you imagine writing that wire transfer? I'm sure they should bring like a Price is Right style check down to Activision or whatever when this deal actually closes. But I mean, we're a week away from when this is happening. I was actually a little surprised that it dropped during the day, given that this is a material size event, meaning that it's a financially impacting Microsoft's bottom line, that it would drop after earnings. But nope, it dropped right during the day. And there you go. Ooh, so is this the last video on the Activision? Probably not, but the big drama should now be behind us. And what's next? Well, the next things that are going to happen is when the Activision deal actually closes, Microsoft, I'm sure, will have some sort of celebration and things will go on and their bank account will get drained, $70 billion or however it's going to be structured. That is the next big step. And then it's going to be what happens to Bobby, right? Remember, prior to all of this, there was a lot of drama around the CEO and his relationship with the company. And many people are expecting, myself included, that once this deal closes, is that he will be exiting. So Microsoft obviously has not done anything yet. You got to remember that Microsoft cannot legally actually make any changes at Activision until after July 18th. And this is why, because imagine if this deal got all the way up to the final deadline and then it didn't happen. And then all of a sudden Activision is back on its heels and dealing with changes by the acquiring company. So Microsoft has had zero input, zero changes made, zero decisions for the company. However, starting on July 18th, that will begin to change. So what happens next? Well, we wait for it to close, assuming that they get through the CMA. We wait to see what happens with the leadership positions within Activision. And then Microsoft should come out with a plan. I mean, that would be the expectation from my end, that they will come out and say, like, look, our intention is to bring these things into Game Pass, which, reminder, has gone up in price. And so those are sort of the big next steps happening in this case. This is such a a milestone moment in the world of gaming. It doesn't matter like if it's Xbox or Sony. I think Sony will continue to be fine. They have plenty of exclusives. They have a great console and they are in a good position. I think this will help Microsoft significantly, right, owning Call of Duty. The question becomes, can Microsoft get these games and things out the door, right? They've had some struggles running internal studios, and adding $70 billion worth of Activision isn't going to make life less complicated for them. So there you go, guys. You are now all up to speed on what we know straight from the court case. Now we watch the market reaction and everything else. And as always, my friends, make sure to keep it subscribed here, because only BS on this channel is me.